Hello, today is the 19th of April, 2016. This is Athens Speakout. I'm David DeWitt, Associate Editor of the Athens News. My guest is Robert Whaley, retired professor of history at Ohio University. And this is Athens Speakout number 362. Today's topic, we have two topics. The first topic, topic A, is the prospects for the New York state primary and the Democratic and Republican primaries for the presidential race in 2016.
Good.
And our topic B is war and peace prospects in the Middle East, economic decline or recovery in the U.S. and the European Union. So we will turn to the good professor here for the first statement. I believe you want to make a statement to start off?
Yeah, well, you want to give your own credentials. What is your criteria for interviewing me?
I am the associate editor of the Athens News.
Yeah, right. And I'm going to start off with a statement that we ended last week with the predictions for the New York State primary. And Hillary was ahead, 53% to 47%. And I just checked the latest poll, and it's exactly the same thing.
It stayed right online, huh?
As far as I can tell, that's going to be the projections. Now, we're going to see tonight, when they start to count,
right,
whether Sanders will go up or below that projection. And then I outlined the problem of the polling and how the New York Times correspondent, Nat Cohn, was backing Hillary on the 29th of March, 2016, and she was winning in the polling with Hispanics, blacks, and with older women, and she has the backing of the Democratic National Committee establishment. And it looks like she is going to be the candidate, according to these polls, against Trump in November. That's the prediction of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And Bernie Sanders is running from behind. Democratic socialism used to advance in Europe from 1870 to 1914, and they were challenging in those decades traditional Christianity, the monarchists, the liberals, and the social democrats. And liberalism was rising in Europe and the United States from about 1811, when the word was invented, to 1922. Now, in 1922 in the United Kingdom, the Liberal Party kind of climaxed and came to an end. And there was a famous book written in England, The Strange Death of the Liberal Party. Lloyd George kind of ruined it in World War I, because the liberals were the party of peace, and England decided to go to war in 1914. And at the end of the war...
Over Belgium.
That was the excuse for going to war, yes.
Right.
But it was more complex.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Always is.
But
there's still a debate raging to this day, though.
Oh, yeah. The causes of World War I is probably the most researched area in history. And my doctor father was a scholar of the origins of World War I. And I, as a student in high school, understood the balance of power from a high school understanding of this. Mm-hmm. And I knew it had multiple causes.
Oh, yeah.
And that fits in with Franklin Roosevelt, and the Second World War, in a sense, was a continuation of the first.
Absolutely.
Yeah, see. So from 1914 to 1943, we have the rise of fascism, Italian fascism, German Nazism, And Hitler almost won World War II. He came close. And democratic socialism and liberalism were all on the defensive. And in England and in France in particular. And then in 1945 to 51, there was a second renaissance of democratic socialism in England and France. And that got weaker and weaker with the anti-communist crusade and the American passion to collapse democratic socialism and totalitarian communism. And from the point of view, the next big change was 1991, when the Soviet totalitarian communism collapsed. And what I'm suggesting is, it's possible that democratic socialism may rise again. But I don't think Hillary,
in America, you mean?
In America and in Europe.
Okay. Well, they do have it to some degree in Europe with the...
Yeah, it's healthier in Europe.
Yeah.
There is a viable democratic socialist party in France.
Oh, you mean a specific political party?
You have to have a political party
Okay.
to promote socialism.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking of the democratic socialist nature of their healthcare and their markets. in
Well, the British,
some European countries.
the British and the French and the Swiss and the Scandinavian countries
Right.
all passed the equivalent of socialized medicine
Right.
with no problem.
Absolutely.
Now, the United States is way, way, way behind.
Terribly, horribly,
Okay.
embarrassingly behind.
Okay. So, Bernie Sanders' idea of socialism is democratic socialism, and he's not saying much that Franklin Roosevelt didn't say.
Right, he's essentially a New Dealer. He's not.
Essentially a
He's
New
not
Dealer.
nearly as radical as the right would portray him.
Yeah, the radical right are rather ignorant of history.
You're telling me. I'm sure.
Okay.
As
So
a
anyway,
historian, that's frustrating.
I read a very interesting article in Nation magazine, written by Eric Altman. You know Eric Altman of Nation?
I've read his byline.
Well,
yeah.
he is a historian, and he's also an active journalist. And he wrote this article on the 2nd to the 19th of March, okay? They have it's a bi-weekly.
Right.
Yeah, so as a historian, he goes back to John Stuart Mill and President Lincoln as a liberal, and President Woodrow Wilson as a liberal, and Franklin Roosevelt as a liberal, and criticizes the mayor of New York, Blasio. He is a weak liberal because
Blasio,
because he is campaigning for the ethnic identity. That's a kind of a psychological interpretation of history. And what the original liberalism was to blend all of the various nationalities and ethnic groups and races under the common identity of liberty and equality for all. That was the campaign of Washington, Lincoln, Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson. That's classical
Big
liberalism.
tent.
Yeah, we have the big tent. So I like Altman's criticism of Bill de Blasio, who is a weak liberal, and maybe he's a weak socialist. I don't know what exactly his campaign.
See, he came in originally campaigning to be much further left than he has been, I think, in practice as mayor of New York.
Yeah.
Because he was supposed to be, much more left wing, and
Yeah.
I think he's been much more moderate than anyone expected.
Well, I don't know about left and moderate, but what Altman's argument is that liberalism is a political philosophy. Psychology is interested in ethnicity and race and national origins and takes an entirely different approach to what politics is all about. So we have a problem. We have a race problem for sure, and we have a psychology problem for sure. And de Blasio, who's half Italian and half black, is exploiting these ethnic differences in order to get elected in New York. But de Blasio could never become a national figure. That was the same problem that Andrew Cuomo had.
Yeah.
Andrew Cuomo was a great speaker. But Mark Shields pointed out, why didn't he run for president? And Mark Shields gave the answer, the same answer that Altman has. Well, there were very few Marios from Virginia to Texas, and there were no there were no Cuomos.
Yeah.
Where Southern Baptists, John Kasich, can get some kind of ethnic identity. You see, that's going to have some.
Kasich's Anglican.
Yeah, but nobody knows that.
Yeah.
Very few people know that.
He was reared Catholic.
Yeah, but his
and
mother
he's
had to have a
become
divorce.
Anglican. Yeah.
So he's a kind of waffling between Catholicism and Episcopalianism. And he's kind of a liberal Catholic. And he has a liberal approach from the point of view of the present spectrum. But he's still playing the ethnic factor. Not as bad as Blasio, but not as good as Altman and Mark Shields would suggest. Anyway, that's what I'm learning about the importance of the rise of socialism again, and the present conflict. Okay, so anyway, Ronald Reagan is important here because Ronald Reagan was a conservative capitalist, Calvinist, who in 1935 went to a small theological school and got the basic rudiment of the disciples of Christ. Then he goes to Hollywood, and he still maintains his Protestant identity as far as his mother and father were concerned, but he becomes much more liberal by meeting Jews in Hollywood, meeting Catholics and so forth and so on. So as an actor, he was able to bridge this ethnic religious gap and made a great actor and a great candidate for getting elected by appealing to all classes, all races, and strangely, his mother was not a racist back in 1933. He never had to apologize for racism, and he never had to apologize for anti-Semitism. He was automatically a very broad-minded Christian who got the Christian vote and at the same time the conservative capitalist vote. So he's the ideal candidate for the Republican model, but the backers of Ronald Reagan, the people at the administrative level, were much more interested in money and raising money for the capitalist class. So in a sense, the good image of Ronald Reagan was exploited by the Bechtel brothers. They made the money.
Yeah. Well, I think that Reagan was actually interested in those things as well. I think
he
a
was
lot of his
interested in
public persona was a farce.
Yeah, well, you see, after he retired from Hollywood, he was originally a Democrat. He voted for the Democrats
Until he met Nancy.
Well, I'm not sure when he turned, but I think he turned a little bit earlier when he got a job for 20 Mule Team, Death Valley Days, and for General Motors. They hired him to give anti-communist speeches. So he became less and less democratically inclined, less and less liberal, and more anti-communist. And that went over big with Nixon, Reagan, and in other words, what I'm saying is anti-communism undermines the democratic
ideology. In the 60s.
Yeah. Okay, question.
Robert, I think, if I remember right, that Ronald Reagan had claimed that he had to register as a Democrat or something like that to become the head of the Screen Actors Guild.
That's right. He was originally a Democrat.
He was the union president and an FBI informant.
That's when he begins to turn to the right.
Right.
J. Edgar Hoover
Yeah.
and Death Valley Days and the General Electric News Hour.
Yeah.
And he made money by delivering those speeches.
Certainly.
It was a natural for him. So that's an example of the decay of a believing Christian and a believing Democrat as a great anti-communist preacher. And that's how he got elected. And I don't think he's the model, my model as a president, but he's still the model for the Republican candidates. They don't want to know anything about a president before Ronald Reagan.
And they don't really even want to hold, Reagan up to the standard of the reality of his presidency.
Yeah.
They've deified him,
Right.
sanctified him,
Right.
and the Ronald Reagan that they paint as they talk about him these days is very far removed from the
Right.
real Ronald Reagan administration.
Anyway, to get back to 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was 16 Soviet socialist republics, and most of them today are small dictatorships. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Armenia and Georgia have the most Christian values and are closest to the West. Now, those Muslim socialist republics are 200 or 300 years behind in understanding either the meaning of liberalism, democracy, or socialism. So Putin's Russia is a very backward kind of power. Anyway, at the UN, the balance of power is United States is still number one, European Union is number two, the United Kingdom is number three, Japan is number four. Now China is now the number one industrial power. And the United States is no longer unilaterally number one. They're going to have competition in a new balance of power. And that's the problem of the future, which Bernie Sanders understands. But most Republicans do not. Anyway, the Russians do have some power, symbolic power. I regard the new Russia, as something like Italy was in 1919. It was an honorary great power. But the real great powers in 1919 were Britain, United States, and France. The Soviet Union was a potential great power, but was isolated because of this communist ideology. And then we get into the nuclear bomb race. Where the new Russia has some power is that they are part of the G8. Now, the G7 are the big capitalist powers. United States, Great Britain, Japan are sovereign as far as the money is concerned. But nobody is on the gold standard. They've all abandoned, they're all on paper money. But the G7 meets every year. And the United States cannot vary the interest rate of the Federal Reserve Bank without getting into trouble with the German Bundesbank, because they then are competing on the inflation debt problem. Mm-hmm. So the debt problem is the hidden problem of all of the great powers. And there's $19 trillion. That's the kicking of the can down the road every 3 months.
Well, yeah, but we have lowered our deficit drastically.
A little bit.
Well, by 40%.
We're not out of the woods. What's that?
We need to continue to lower
Well,
it.
the deficit is the annual.
Yeah, I know.
The national debt keeps going up.
Yeah, but it's going up at less high a pace as we lower the deficit.
I think that Barack Obama has done a better job than George W. Bush.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
A great chunk of the debt is still a result of the Iraq wars,
right?
The two wars, the two Bush wars in the Middle East, Medicare Part D, the unfunding of it, and his tax cuts.
Yeah, right.
Those are the three biggest drivers of the debt even now today.
Right. But the debt problem is deeper than any of these candidates the national debt problem and the foreign trade debt problem.
I'm a little surprised that the Republicans, for as much as they've been banging the drum about the debt, the entire Obama administration, I'm kind of surprised that the Republican candidates haven't talked about that a little bit more
They can't.
this year.
They don't want to collect any taxes.
Because, yeah,
You have one pie.
right.
If you cut taxes, the debt is going to grow. It's
No,
the
they want to
simplest-
cut they won't cut taxes. They don't want to raise taxes, and they don't want to cut the military. So the only other option is to cut.
Keep expanding the debt.
Yeah, well, keep expanding the debt or make cuts to popular programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Although Social Security does not add 1 penny to the debt.
Okay. In any case, we have an economic stalemate. And no matter whether Hillary wins or whether Sanders wins, they both may turn out to be a one-term president.
I think that it's very likely that whoever wins in November is going to be a one-term president.
Yeah, it's going to be rough
I would
going.
bet almost anything on that at this
Okay,
point.
all right.
And in a way, there's an argument to be made that it would be better for
Well, I'm not going to make any arguments
Democrats.
to go. No, I think that's Machiavellian false thinking.
You think so?
I vote for the best Democrat. I'm not trying to game the Republican game.
Yeah, I agree. I
If Trump
agree.
beats Cruz, that's a Republican problem.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
They'll have to solve that one way or the other.
Well, either way, they're both Trump and Cruz are terrifying to me.
They
The thought
are
of them in
dangerous.
the
They are
Oval
dangerous.
Office. Yeah.
They are dangerous. I don't think either one of us are going to vote for Trump or Cruz. Well, I guess that's enough for the statements. Why don't you ask me
The
the
first question.
Yeah.
All right. What is the case for Hillary Clinton's victory in New York today?
Well, she has certain assets. She does have money from Wall Street, and you need money to buy candidates. No question about that. Now, whether that's a scandal or whether that's dishonest or not, that's going to be
Well,
a
it's
debate.
not illegal because
not illegal.
Anthony Kennedy declared it not illegal
They can't outlaw it.
in the Supreme Court decision, Citizens United.
Right. Okay, so she's got Wall Street money, and that's a help to get delegates. She's won the black vote. That's a second asset. She's won the Hispanic vote. That's a third asset. And she will probably get 50 to 60% of the women, and that's an age problem. Hillary is getting the young women who are working for a living and have to pay Social Security, single moms. That's Hillary's. But there are married women, older women, who are on Social Security who need security. So Hillary Clinton isn't going to get some of the women's vote and some of the feminists.
Social Security must be protected
Yeah, well,
at all costs.
nobody wants to cut Social Security except Republicans.
Republicans, I was going to say,
Yeah,
they do.
right. But anyway, she's going to get some young feminists and she's going to get older women. But the high school teachers, 25 to 45, are probably going to go for Sanders because they're looking for the future.
Young people in general tend to
Right,
favor
you got
Sanders.
it. Anyway, now Hillary has some experience, but I think her State Department experience is greatly exaggerated.
Yeah, you weren't very impressed by her tenure in the...
Yeah, but she does have
Foggy Bottom.
experience in going around to the states because she did run for governor of Arkansas through Bernie.
Bill.
Through Bernie and Bill. I mean, Bill and Hillary were a team in Arkansas in getting elected.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can take that and go around in 1993, and they won in 1992 by going around to the states. So she's had more experience in the 50 states.
Well, sure. And
And
she's
the
been
problem-
a known personality in American political life for, you know,
Right. Now, the problem with Hillary,
Not
and
quite
the problem
30 years,
with Bernie
but
Sanders,
25.
the problem with Bernie Sanders, this is his first run.
nationwide. Yeah, he wasn't very well known nationwide outside of far left-wing circles
Right.
before
He was known
this
in
election
Vermont.
cycle. He was known in Vermont. He was known among progressives, but he wasn't known to the nation
But he's
at
only
large.
had one term for senator. he hasn't been in the Senate very long. He mostly served as
Mayor of Burlington.
Burlington. He's very interested in ecology, and he's campaigning on the idea of socialism, which is exceedingly courageous and exceedingly honest. And I think he's opening the door to the future. I think whether Bernie wins or loses, there's going to be a larger socialist discussion in the next term.
I agree, and that's exactly why I supported him in the first place. I really never entertained or allowed myself to believe that he was going to win this nomination,
Right.
although I would welcome it as a pleasant surprise.
Right.
But I wanted him to run. I
Right.
wanted him in this race because I knew that he could change the conversation and bring progressive ideas to the fore.
Right.
Which he has done, and I think you're right. I think it will be successful. I think it'll pave the way for future candidates to be even more embracing of progressive values.
Now, a tenth advantage of Hillary is that she is debating with Sanders, and she's making Sanders and Hillary together to make a good team if they reconcile their differences at the end. In November, I think Hillary may, if she's smart, she'll make some kind of reconciliation to Sanders and the socialist movement.
Sanders supporters, yeah, she'll have to reach out, and if he's responsible, he'll do his part like she did in 2008.
So the Democrats are in
encourage
better
his
shape than the
supporters.
Republicans.
Oh, absolutely,
The
because Ted
Republicans
Cruz,
are cannibals.
Ted Cruz and Donald Trump can't stand each other.
Right.
And the only way for them to end up without a brokered convention is for them to come to some sort of agreement. Now, Donald Trump talks about what a great deal maker he is and how he's always going to get the best deals. So I guess that'll really be put to the test in Cleveland this summer, because he's going to either have to strike a deal with Ted Cruz, or they're going to have a truly brokered convention, and who knows who might be their candidate. Because right now, Donald Trump can't win the general, and Ted Cruz can't win the nomination.
Right. Turning now to the international problem. Barack Obama is a weak president because he couldn't bring himself to criticize George W. Bush. And Hillary Clinton, as a Secretary of State, is a weak Secretary of State. They can't criticize the Bush administration.
Candidate Obama criticized the Bush administration.
How?
Well, he was opposed to the Iraq War, and he
That's
was very
when he
vocal.
was still a candidate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But after he became president,
Right.
silence on what Cheney and Bush did between 2000 and 2008.
Yeah.
They are captive of the CIA and the Defense Department.
Well, there's the deep state problem.
Yeah,
in
you
general.
call it the deep state. Okay.
Yeah, I call it the deep state.
I call it the military-industrial complex.
It's part of the same problem.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
you could make distinctions between the two, but it's all basically part of the same problem.
So anyway, Barack Obama and Hillary drifted into Libya and helped overthrow Gaddafi. But that made the situation worse.
He
not
called recently that the worst mistake of his presidency.
Well,
Not the overthrowing of Gaddafi, but not planning
Yeah,
for the day after.
yeah.
That's what President Obama recently said was what he would call the worst mistake of his presidency.
All right. He's better than George W. Bush.
Well, just by
better than Cheney.
by virtue of admitting a mistake.
Yeah. Cheney
Yeah,
wouldn't admit
well,
any mistake.
No, absolutely.
They might
not.
still defend torture.
They still do.
Now, Obama is slow in closing Guantanamo down.
Yeah, well, he can't do it unilaterally, though. He needs the Congress.
He needs the Congress. That's
and the
right.
Congress has
Said, what are you
steadfastly
gonna-"
refused to work with him on anything.
That's true.
They've cleared the table.
Anyway.
They will not work with him.
Anyway, we have two new wars in ISIS and ISIL and the Caliphate. And Secretary of State John Kerry is trying to get a truce. He may get it, but there's no solution yet because he needs the aid of Russia to get a truce in Syria.
Yeah.
So
Because
far,
Russia and
so
Iran,
far, Kerry is a vacillator.
that's a hard problem to work out because right now it all comes down to support for the Assad regime.
Yeah, Assad. Well, that was a mistake to try and overthrow Assad.
Yeah, well, it opened up a power vacuum, and as we know from history in the Middle East, anytime a power vacuum opens, religious fanatics tend to fill it because they're the most organized.
We have a comment here.
No, it's a halfway point.
Well, we have to stop. We're going slower than I had expected, but anyway, my friend from the Athens News, Dave DeWitt, is interviewing me about the long-term historical problems of the present 2016 race and the closeness of the Democratic race between Hillary, a feminist, and Sanders, an avowed socialist, and the same problem in the Republican Party is even more intense. Is that a good summary of
That
the
sounds
halftime?
good.
All right, let's go on to a second question, a new question.
What is the Democratic total number of delegates as of April 18th?
Yeah, well, that's the big race. The delegate count on the Democratic sides is Hillary has 1,289 delegates. She's ahead, and she has 469 superdelegates, and they can change their vote if there is a block convention.
Right. They
And
only have to stick in the first.
Sanders is behind with 1,076 votes, delegates, and superdelegates, he only has 31. And you need 2,383 delegates before July. It's a long time to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
David, I had a question for you. I know last year you went to Cleveland. Are you planning on making the return trip up there?
Yeah, I plan to go to both conventions.
But you're going to go to Philadelphia.
I'm going to go to both. Yep.
Well, you'll be well informed.
I'm for good or ill. I'm going to be right in the thick of it. So.
Are you going as a journalist or a concerned citizen? Or
As a journalist. I'm credentialed.
He's a credentialist, but he can put his thumb on the scale behind the scenes.
Well, yeah, yeah. And I mean, whatever I write for the Athens News will be pretty straightforward convention coverage. But what I write for other media outlets will have my opinion, plenty of my own opinion in it.
Do you have other journalist outlets?
Oh, yeah. I write for a variety of different publications. I write
give us an example.
I write for plunderbun.com, which is
What is that?
It's the leading progressive watchdog website of Ohio politics. It's based in Ohio, and we cover the General Assembly and the governor.
So that gives you great insight into the assembly race.
Yeah, well,
And all the counties, 88 counties.
yeah, mostly we focus on statewide issues, not individual races, but yeah, we could cover anything across
Right.
Ohio.
Right.
I also write for governmentexecutive.com, which is a product of the Atlantic Media Company, and it covers the ins and outs, kind of the day-to-day of governance across America.
Right.
Do you ever submit anything to publications like maybe Rolling Stone or anything like that?
Rolling Stone, for instance, doesn't really accept just random, what we call query letters in the business. But I'm always trying to expand who I write for and who I can reach. I just want to reach a bigger and bigger audience. So hopefully one day.
Okay, to get over to the Republican side, New York Times economist Paul Krugman, in April, just a couple of days ago, wrote a column which was very disappointing.
Yes.
He argues of why he's supporting Hillary over. You read that column.
I've been following that for a while. Because I like Krugman.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed his work for years, and he is definitely a strong Hillary supporter. And one of the more interesting sub-arguments, I think, through this election cycle between Hillary and Bernie supporters is the argument between Krugman of the New York Times and Robert Reich,
He's my man.
who is
From
who's
Berkeley, California.
From Berkeley, Robert Reich. He was Bill Clinton's labor secretary, but he's actually a Bernie Sanders supporter.
That's right.
And he's taken Krugman on
Yeah.
a lot of those columns.
Well,
so
he's
they've
an
had
academic.
a good,
He's an academic, and he can be free.
yeah. And they've had a
Krugman
good
is tied
tete-a-tete.
up with the New York Times, and that's part. The mass media is part of the establishment.
And the New York Times, the Gray Lady is very establishment.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
no
he
denying
also,
that.
being Jewish, he has a Jewish following with those papers.
Yeah. The New York Times
Yeah.
has a great Jewish following. Anyway, the title of this article was called Pastrami Principle, which is a bunch of propaganda. Because what we used to say when I was a kid was, there's no such thing as these politicians who say, I'm campaigning for pie in the sky, motherhood, and pride. That was the old pastrami. All candidates in favor of apple pie and motherhood. So I wasn't impressed with pastrami. Anyway,
Right.
that was my personal reaction to that. Anyway, and I agree that we should follow Robert Reich for the future.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'll summarize this by saying that I guess I've said a long way to Philadelphia. I guess we can skip a little ahead now.
Do you want?
Wait, a question? You have a new question
I can go on if you'd like me to
about
the
what's the next question?
the case for Bernie Sanders in New York.
The case for Bernie Sanders.
Right.
Okay, right there. We needed to get up a little faster. Sanders has opened up the door to the academics, and he's won in places like Athens County, where Ohio University, Bowling Green, Miami University, Kent University, and I expect that he will do well in Syracuse, New York, where there's a big university, and he will pick up some votes in Ithaca, New York, the home of Cornell. Sanders may well take New York State, but this is where Sanders is going to get some of his votes.
Right.
And he made a little bit of a stir when Sanders decided to go to the Vatican and talk to the Vatican academics on climate changing and new economic needs of the global economy. I don't think it changed his polls very much, but in the long run, that was a good move on the part of Sanders, and it kept the race at least equal. But the big news that I'm adding today is that I recently got a New York Times correspondent by the name of Roger Cohn. Now, he's been supporting Hillary for the most part. But just yesterday, he comes out with an editorial trying to reconcile the Jewish vote in New York. And he is giving some good words for Bernie Sanders. And he says that Bernie Sanders is right in saying that Israel has used disproportionate force in the Gaza campaign in 2014. And the American people, including the Jews of New York, are going to have to respect the dignity of the Palestinians, and the United States government is going to have to be more even-handed between the state of Israel and the Palestinian people. And Benjamin Netanyahu is not right on all issues. So I found this an opening wedge to a reconciliation of Hillary and Bernie at the end of the campaign, assuming that Hillary wins. So I thought that was a pretty good editorial. So that he quotes David Ben-Gurion, 1948. Peace is more important than real estate. Unfortunately, the Israeli government hasn't led up to the ideals of Ben-Gurion.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that was very good. And you didn't read that editorial, huh?
I didn't see that one, no.
Yeah, it's either yesterday or today or the day before.
Okay.
Now, another important point for Sanders is that a new senator from Oregon by the name of Senator Merkley is
John
the
Merkley.
first senator to endorse Bernie, and more from Oregon may follow. Oregon has a tradition of being a very liberal state, and the other senator, Wyden, may well follow, and Sanders may have a recovery in Oregon. And Oregon was the home of Wayne Morse, who was the first to vote against the Vietnam War, and Mark Hatfield was another senator, a Republican, by the way, who joined the anti-war movement and joined the Democratic Doves and tried to, with McGovern, tried to cut off the funding of the unwinnable Vietnam War. So Sanders is still in the race. Now, the most important thing is this editorial.
The Progressive
Magazine. And it was dated back in November of 2013. And it was written by John Nichols of the Nation magazine. And that story is the best case for Bernie. He makes a better case for Bernie than Bernie himself makes. And he says that Bernie Sanders is going to be endorsed by both the Progressive and the Nation, and that Obama is a good speaker, but Obama is a weak president. And he says that Sanders visited Obama in the Oval Office on the day that Obama was inaugurated back in 2009. And he gave Obama some advice. You should make Franklin Roosevelt as your model.
I would have given them that same advice.
Right. And he told Obama, don't be like Bill Clinton. He's no model. Be like Franklin Roosevelt. And then Sanders and Nichols go on to say, unfortunately, Bill didn't live up to that advice, and they wandered into some more wars in Yugoslavia.
Oh yeah. Bill was supposed to be like FDR?
No, this is what Bernie Sanders advised.
Okay.
Said, don't follow Bill.
Yeah.
He's
yeah.
had trouble.
Bill is known for his triangulation.
Triangulation, yeah. And
yeah.
He had...
There's the old joke about Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton saw a fork in the road, so he took it.
Yeah. So anyway, Obama was silent on the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. And I think that's good for Sanders and good for the future of the country. Sanders was governor of, not governor, but mayor of Burlington, was great on ecology. And he ran for the House of Representatives, and 10% of the state legislature in Vermont belonged to the Vermont Progressive Coalition. So he's both an independent and a Democrat in addition, because he has to vote with the Democrats once he gets into the Senate to get as a caucus with them. So It's all right to vote for the Green Party and then support the Democrats if you lose. A third party is not going to make it
No.
on its own. So anyway, Hillary Clinton then is on the defensive ideologically. That's a point of this article of Nichols, and only those two magazines are national publications that endorse Sanders, and Sanders is following an uphill battle in order to get further traction. Anyway, Sanders is a critic of TV as one of the establishments. He's a critic of the Democratic establishment and asks Clinton, where does she get her money? And Sanders is saying, I get my money by small contributions. And he comes across as the most honest of the candidates, even among the independents. And Sanders may win some of the independent vote. He supports Hillary on Roe versus Wade. He supports Hillary on Social Security. There are 90% agreement on the issues. Mm-hmm. It's just the war issue where he's going out on front. Well, I guess we're ready for the delegate count.
We're going to go to the Republican side now?
What is the Republican total delegate count as of the 19th of April? Trump, Cruz, and Kasich. Trump is number one with 54% of the vote. Cruz is number two with 21% of the vote. He's creeped up against Kasich. A week ago, Kasich was second and Cruz was third. Mm-hmm. But apparently Cruz is working hard in upstate New York.
Yeah.
And he's getting some votes,
And
which I thought he wouldn't get.
Kasich is sliding, yeah.
Yeah, well, Kasich is too moderate, you see. Anyway, that's the Republican total delegate count. Trump has 744 delegates. Cruz has 555 delegates. And Kasich is third with 144 delegates. And there are 1,237 votes necessary for the Cleveland Convention. So those are the important statistics. Do you want to go to the Democratic conclusion here?
Yeah, the next question?
Well, I'm jumping ahead, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
I'm jumping ahead to the...
What you're predicting? Making a prediction?
No, I'm just saying what the situation is as of the 19th.
Oh, okay.
Today,
yeah,
see?
what are the polls saying on the Democratic side?
Okay. The polls still say that Clinton is going to get 53% of the vote in New York. Sanders is going to get 47%. That was the same as a week ago. Mm-hmm. So all of the campaigning has not moved the needle one thing. Perhaps Hillary will not do as well as projected. Maybe she will win. That'll be the great count tonight, tomorrow morning. Find out.
We will find out.
In other words, Sanders is making a brave attempt to close the gap in the last week of the campaign.
Yeah, this is kind of his last big shot here.
Yeah. So on the total delegate counts, Clinton has 1,289 delegates. Sanders has 145 delegates. And on the superdelegates, which are the wild card, Sanders is trailing with only 31 delegates, and Hillary has 469 delegates. So Philadelphia is a long way away because they need 2,383 delegates to close the nomination. So projecting ahead, on the 26th of April, next week, there are going to be 5 decisive states. Big report next week. Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. And Hillary is ahead in the delegate count so far but we shall see. So that's then is the projection of the future. And I want to say one more thing, that in Wyoming, there has been some reports. On the 18th of April this year, Trump won all of the delegates in the Wyoming caucus. That's enabled him to get a few more of these delegates. And Trump is going to fight the Colorado delegation, because in the Republican primary, you got these state conventions that can veto the primary vote.
You're right.
In South Carolina
There was a
and in
caucus
Georgia,
in Colorado,
there's going to be
too.
a royal fight.
There's going to be a lot of fighting, and that's if you've noticed. That's why Donald Trump has brought on all these new advisors in the past week. These guys are specific delegate. They call them delegate hunters.
Delegate hunters, right?
And these guys are supposed to figure out what the delegates want, how to appeal to them, what to promise them, maybe what to promise them with a wink that's not exactly legal to promise to them.
Right.
And they're just trying to get their game ready to have these bare-knuckle fights on the floor in Cleveland,
Right.
which is what it might come down to.
Well, to go backwards now in time, back to our original question about how Cruz used the religious issue in New York. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Cruz has been playing the religious issue, as you termed it, like a harpsichord the entire election so far. So it's not really surprising to me that he's doing it in New York now, too.
Well, he's doing it upstate. He's not winning anything in Brooklyn.
He has to. Yeah.
He's getting some in Long Island.
And that's where he knows where he needs to appeal.
Suburbia and upstate New York.
But he's rolled back out his tent revivalist shtick.
I'm surprised he did so well. Anyway, he argues that he is a televangelist.
See, I didn't even know you were going to say that. I call him a tent revivalist.
Well, there's an article here
Oh, yeah?
in the USA Today.
Oh, yeah, tell it.
Cruz fits the bill. A Tea Party man
A T-vangelical.
and a Tea-vangelist, natural candidate for the Republican grassroots. This was published on the 7th of April, 2016.
That's good, T-vangelical.
So it's Christianity first, televangelists. Okay. Now, this was written by a religious writer, Dave Brody, correspondent for the Christian Broadcasting Network, CNBC. Well, I must say I haven't been following that, but that was a good article of getting Cruz some exposure, okay? And I have to take Dave Brody and CNBC as a serious challenge to the Democrats.
Well, it's been working for Cruz. He's obviously surpassed Kasich in the polls in New York now.
Well, that was last week, but as of today, he's supposed to come in third, but it's like 1 point behind.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Because that's what struck my curiosity, is whether he's peeling voters away from Trump or Kasich. And it seems to me like he'd be taking them away from Kasich by painting Kasich as too wishy-washy or moderate on the religious litmus test.
Well, the televisionists and the Tea Party are more loyal to Cruz.
Absolutely.
And Kasich is a kind of a moderate, as you say.
Relative moderate. He's not a real moderate.
He's
compared to Donald Trump and Ted Cruz.
Yeah, but you see, that point that you made, that he is actually an Episcopalian, although everybody thinks he's a Catholic.
Yeah.
He is a kind of
religious-wise, is he moderate? Yeah.
Yeah, he's a religious liberal. Okay.
Yeah.
He can get the Catholic vote. He's going to do well in Catholic towns. Now, I'm interested in the county count that we'll get next week. You know, in what counties did Kasich get his votes? What county did Cruz get his votes? We all know that Brooklyn and Manhattan they'll either be for Hillary or
Yeah. Trump.
The Republicans are going to be, or they might get Staten Island. Staten Island is another
Yeah.
suburban state, a suburban district. So that's important, is to look at, you see, the Ohio delegates are chosen like, no, the New York delegates are like Ohio's delegates back in 1972 when I ran.
Mm-hmm.
It's by congressional district.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
You see, there are 29 districts, like District 1, District 2 are in Nassau County and Suffolk County.
Mm-hmm.
So the delegates are by congressional district. And then Buffalo has its own district.
Mm-hmm.
And Albany has a district. So this is where the vote is going to be very scattered.
Robert, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, I guess we're up to cruise, and I don't think I have much more to say about the religious issue, except as a good close, is to quote the First Amendment. If all of these candidates would make a pledge to the First Amendment, they could cut down some of this debate. Mm-hmm. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion, and nobody knows that establishment means collecting taxes, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, that wants to be ignored by the fanatics, or abridging the freedom of speech. In other words, freedom of religion comes before freedom of speech, press, and the right of the people to assemble. That is the most important amendment if Christian civilization or Jewish civilization is to survive. I guess I'll stop with that point.
That sounds good. Well, I think that the separation of church and state is one of the pillars of the Enlightenment.
Right,
And
you got it.
It's probably one of the only things that's allowed the republic to survive and
Right.
to thrive in the way that it has in Western civilization in general.
Right.
Otherwise, we would be stuck in a situation very similar to what we see in the Middle East with theocracy and
Terrible.
war and death
They're
and
200 or 300 years behind in
yeah.
thinking.
Yeah, and think about what happened 200 or 300 years ago, the wall of separation between church and state.
Wars. The Shia don't like the Sunnis. The Iranians
Right.
don't like the Saudis. And who knows where the military will act next.
And it goes on and on. But
Okay,
as you always say, debate
is the oxygen of democracy.
That's right.
And I'm glad you're here to carry on this debate. And we've got a big debate next week.
Thank you, Professor.